For decades, the conflict between Israel and Iran was a clandestine affair, a shadow war fought through proxies, assassinations, and cyber attacks. It was a deadly game of chess played in the dark corners of the Middle East, far from the public eye. However, recent events have shattered this unspoken arrangement, dragging the animosity into the harsh light of day. The direct exchange of fire between the two nations marks a terrifying new chapter, one where the old rules no longer apply. This is no longer a battle fought by others on foreign soil. It has now become a direct confrontation between two of the region's most formidable military powers, bringing with it an unprecedented risk of catastrophic escalation for everyone involved. The turning point arrived in April 2024. In retaliation for a suspected Israeli airstrike on its consulate in Damascus, a sovereign diplomatic compound, Iran launched an unprecedented barrage of over 300 drones and missiles directly at Israel. This was a moment of profound significance. For the first time, the Islamic Republic attacked the State of Israel from its own territory, crossing a red line that had held for more than 40 years. Though Israel, with significant help from its allies, successfully intercepted the vast majority of these projectiles, the psychological and strategic impact was immense. The shadow war had ended and a direct, overt conflict had begun, setting the stage for a perilous and unpredictable future. Israel's response, though seemingly calibrated to avoid a full-scale war, was nonetheless a clear message. Israeli forces conducted retaliatory strikes inside Iran, targeting military infrastructure near Isfahan. This tit-for-tat exchange demonstrated that both sides possessed the capability and, more alarmingly, the willingness to strike one another directly. The illusion of deniability that had long defined their conflict was gone forever. Each action now necessitates a reaction, creating a dangerous cycle of escalation that becomes progressively harder to control with every move. The region, and indeed the world, now holds its breath, watching to see if the next retaliatory blow will be the one that pushes the conflict past the point of no return. This new reality has plunged the entire Middle East into a state of heightened alert. The unspoken protocols that once governed this rivalry have been torn to shreds, replaced by a raw and open hostility. The danger now lies not only in the deliberate actions of leaders, but also in the potential for miscalculation. In such a volatile environment, a single mistake, a stray missile, or a misinterpreted intelligence report could be the spark that ignites a full-blown regional conflagration. The shift from a proxy-based shadow war to direct state-on-state hostilities is the most perilous development in the Middle East in a generation, forcing every nation to reconsider its position in a newly unstable landscape. The conflict between Israel and Iran cannot be viewed in isolation. It is the epicenter of a much wider regional struggle, a geopolitical earthquake whose tremors are felt across the entire Middle East. Iran has spent years cultivating a network of powerful proxy forces, often referred to as the axis of resistance. This network includes formidable groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, various militias in Syria and Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen. These groups are not merely allies, they are extensions of Iranian power, armed, trained, and funded by Tehran. A direct war between Israel and Iran would almost certainly activate this entire network, transforming a bilateral conflict into a multi-front war that would engulf the region. Hezbollah, based on Israel's northern border in Lebanon, represents the most immediate and potent threat. With an estimated arsenal of over 150,000 rockets and missiles, many of which are precision-guided, the group has the capacity to inflict devastating damage on Israeli cities and strategic infrastructure. A full-scale war with Iran would inevitably draw Hezbollah into the fray, opening a bloody northern front that would be far more destructive than the 2006 Lebanon war. The prospect of fighting a war on two major fronts simultaneously, against Iran to the east and Hezbollah to the north, is a nightmare scenario for Israeli military planners and a source of profound anxiety for the Israeli public, who would bear the brunt of the attacks. Beyond Lebanon, the battleground would quickly expand. Iranian-backed militias stationed in Syria and Iraq, already engaged in low-level hostilities, would undoubtedly escalate their attacks. These groups could launch rockets and drones towards Israel, further stretching its air defense systems and sowing chaos. This creates a terrifying domino effect. A strike in Iran could trigger a response from Lebanon, which could then provoke a wider Israeli operation in Syria, drawing in more militias and potentially destabilizing the fragile governments in both Baghdad and Damascus. The conflict would spread like a wildfire, consuming everything in its path and respecting no national borders. This expansion of the conflict would have catastrophic humanitarian consequences. A multi-front war would lead to mass casualties, widespread destruction, and immense displacement, creating refugee crises that would dwarf those seen in recent years. The delicate political balances in countries like Lebanon and Iraq would likely shatter, paving the way for renewed civil strife and providing fertile ground for extremist groups to re-emerge. The stability of the entire region, already hanging by a thread, would be utterly destroyed. The web of alliances and proxies that Iran has so carefully constructed means that a war with Israel would not be a contained event. It would be a regional calamity with no clear end in sight. The escalating tensions between Israel and Iran are not merely a regional matter, they are deeply entangled in the broader rivalries of global superpowers. The United States stands as Israel's most crucial and powerful ally, providing billions of dollars in military aid and an unwavering diplomatic security blanket. This ironclad relationship means that a major war involving Israel would almost inevitably draw in Washington. The US has already played a direct role, assisting in the interception of Iranian projectiles and deploying its own military assets to the region as a deterrent. Any further escalation would place immense pressure on the United States to intervene more forcefully, transforming a regional war into a confrontation with global implications. On the other side of this geopolitical chessboard, Iran is not without powerful friends. Russia has become an increasingly close partner, particularly since the war in Ukraine, with the two nations cooperating on military technology and diplomatic strategy. Moscow sees the conflict as an opportunity to challenge American influence in the Middle East and divert Western attention and resources. Similarly, China, while maintaining a more cautious public stance, has significant economic interest in Iran and shares a strategic objective with Russia in curbing US global dominance. The backing of these two nuclear-armed powers provides Iran with a strategic depth it would otherwise lack, emboldening its actions and complicating any international response. This alignment of global powers creates a terrifyingly familiar dynamic, reminiscent of the Cold War, where regional conflicts become proxy battlegrounds for superpower competition. A miscalculation in the Middle East could quickly spiral into a direct or indirect confrontation between the United States, Russia, and China. An American strike on Iranian soil, for example, could provoke a response from Russia, either diplomatically or through covert military support. The risk is that the conflict would no longer be about the grievances between Jerusalem and Tehran, but would become a theater for a much larger struggle for global supremacy, with the people of the Middle East caught in the crossfire. The global economic repercussions of such a conflict would be devastating. The Middle East is the world's artery for oil and gas, and a major war would inevitably disrupt the flow of energy through critical choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. This would cause energy prices to skyrocket, triggering a global economic crisis, fueling inflation, and potentially leading to a worldwide recession. The interconnectedness of the modern world means that no country would be immune to the fallout. The conflict between Israel and Iran, therefore, holds the entire global economy hostage, demonstrating how a regional feud, amplified by superpower rivalries, has the potential to destabilize the entire international system. Within Israel itself, the drumbeat of war is met with a growing sense of trepidation and dissent. While the political and military establishment projects an image of strength and readiness, a significant portion of the populace is deeply anxious about the prospect of a multi-front existential conflict. Voices from across the political spectrum are beginning to question the wisdom of relentless escalation, pointing to the catastrophic price that would be paid by ordinary citizens. There are increasing calls for restraint and a return to diplomacy, recognizing that a military victory, even if achievable, would come at an unbearable cost in terms of human life, economic ruin, and the very fabric of Israeli society. This internal debate is a crucial, if often overlooked, element of the crisis. The alternative to this path of mutual destruction is, as it has always been, diplomacy. It is a difficult and often frustrating path, fraught with obstacles and requiring immense political will. Yet it is the only sane course of action when the alternative is a regional war that could spiral into a global catastrophe, a potential World War III. Urgent, concerted efforts are needed from the international community, led by the United States, Europe, and even Russia and China, to pull both sides back from the brink. This requires creating off-ramps for de-escalation, re-establishing channels of communication, and addressing the core grievances that fuel the conflict, rather than simply managing the latest crisis. Ignoring the urgency of this moment would be a historic mistake. The current trajectory is not sustainable. A strategy based on tit-for-tat retaliation is a recipe for disaster, as each side feels compelled to have the last word, pushing the other closer to an all-out response. The recent direct attacks have broken long-standing taboos and set a dangerous precedent. Without a decisive diplomatic intervention to break this cycle, it is not a matter of if a wider war will break out, but when. The world cannot afford to be a passive spectator as the Middle East marches towards an abyss that could consume us all. The stakes are simply too high. Ultimately, the choice is between a future of endless conflict and one of negotiated security. The path of war offers only destruction, instability, and the haunting specter of a global confrontation. The path of diplomacy, however difficult, offers a glimmer of hope, a chance to avoid the unthinkable and build a more stable future for the Middle East and the world. Leaders in Israel, Iran, and across the globe must find the courage and wisdom to choose this path. The fate of millions depends on their decision. To continue down the current road is to gamble with the future of humanity itself, a risk that no responsible leader should be willing to take.